Please welcome Program Committee Member and Moderator Wren Wescoatt and the Developers Roundtable panel.
Good morning. My name is Wren Wescoatt. I was raised on Molokai, and now I live on Oahu. I am Director of Development for Longroad Energy and have been working on wind and solar projects in Hawaii for about 15 years. And I've been coming to the Energy Conference for, I think, every year. As our state moves toward 100% decarbonized power, much of the lowest cost clean energy will come from large grid-connected renewable projects. These projects are complicated, expensive, and sometimes controversial, but they really move the needle in replacing fossil fuel generation. I'm excited to have on our panel 3 of Hawaii's most successful developers of utility-scale wind and solar. Noe Kalipi with Aukahi Energy is working on Hawaii's first offshore wind project. And she previously developed wind projects at Kahiawa, right here, and Kahuku and Kauailoa on Oahu. Nicola Park with Clearway Energy. She developed 5 of the solar projects on Oahu, totaling over 180 megawatts AC. And Kirstin Punu with AES Clean Energy. Kirstin and her team have developed solar and wind projects on Kauai, Oahu, and Hawaii Island, including what will be the state's largest PV project, Kuahelani, right here on Maui, which is under construction. So I would like why don't you each introduce yourselves. Noe, could we start with you?
Okay, is this on? Oh, aloha, everyone. I'm Noe, and I was born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii, and that's where I still live. I spent about 18 years in Washington, D.C., going to school and working for Senator Akaka before I came back home to raise my family here. I have 2 daughters. And I work with Progression Energy. And Progression Energy is a renewable energy company that has a relationship-based development model. We work with people in place, host communities, and local systems to design and deliver clean energy solutions that meet local needs and can be used globally. And for Hawaii, the project we're working on is a floating offshore wind farm. My boss, Chris Swartley from Progression Energy, just flew in and is in the audience, and Wren and I worked together at UPC Wind, which became First Wind, where we all got to know each other really well, building the Kahiawa wind power farm up here with Hilton Unemori and Kent Smith, 2 Maui residents and leaders. When Chris first approached me about offshore wind, I said, oh, shut up. And that was back in 2011. And then he kept calling me for 6 months, and I said, okay, look, if we're gonna do this, then we're gonna meet with everybody who's going to share their concerns and absolutely hate the project. And if after listening to all those people, you think this is something we still should do and you can garner the resources to do it, then we'll talk about it. That was back in 2011. And we had 25 meetings in that 1 week and have now had hundreds and met with many of you in the audience. And we appreciate your mana'o. In 2018, we created a joint venture with EDF Renewables, and that joint venture is called Progression Hawaii Offshore Wind. So when people have talked to us over the last 10 years, we've referred to the project as Progression Hawaii Offshore Wind. We partnered with EDF because of their extensive experience in offshore wind and utility management and all of the expertise. But most importantly, their president, Tristan Grambert, developed the Kohala wind farm. So he understood what it takes to develop in Hawaii. And that was very, very important for us. So you'll see Aukahi Energy, that's the name of our actual proposed project, which we still have another 9 years to go in development. But we finally have a proposed site, and so because of we have the site, then we could do the mo'olelo and come up with the name. So that's why usually every year we sponsor as Progression Hawaii Offshore Wind, and this year it's Aukahi. And I don't think I'm here to talk about offshore wind as much as I'm here to talk about what are the challenges and solutions and opportunities we have as developers. Mahalo.
Thanks, Nicola?
Aloha, everyone. I'm Nicola Park, Director Hawaii for Clearway Energy Group. I've just been so energized by this conference. I just have to say this has just given me so much hope. Development can be really challenging, as all of us here on the panel know. And it's conferences like this and seeing everybody working together towards this common goal that's just really encouraging and gives me a ton of hope. And I guess I would also just say, technically, all of us here are competitors. We're in these competitive procurements together. And in some cases, we've gone head to head on like the same project or the same piece of land.
Yeah, the last conference, Alicia and Shelley were super nice and in emphasizing how they're not competitors, we are. So the smiles you see up here are totally fake. Nicola, go on.
Oh my gosh. Wren, you cut me off before I got to the point where we're all really good friends. No, seriously, we really are. Wren and I have worked at the same company at 2 different iterations of companies, at San Edison and then NRG, and all of us really are, I would say, on the common battlefield together, going through many of the same challenges and finding many of the same opportunities and collaborating where we can. Yeah, I just wanted to say that. We all deeply care as well, and I know that as people who have raised families or are raising families here, and deeply care about the energy transition. So I head up utility scale development for Clearway Energy. I have for the last 6 years. I've been doing utility scale development here for the past 10 years, and for about 5 years before that at various companies. Clearway has over 8 gigawatts across the country of renewable energy assets, 7 gigawatts of which is owned and operated by our publicly traded affiliate company, Clearway Energy, Inc. In Hawaii, as Wren said, we have a footprint of 185 megawatts. In 2019, 110 megawatts came online across 3 projects. And then more recently, out of the stage 1 procurement, we had 2 projects. I'll talk a little bit about the Mililani 1 project, which was a big success last year, coming online in July, just in time for the coal plant retirement. And then more recently, the Waiava Solar project. So we're also really excited about our stage 3 pipeline of projects across the islands. I guess I would just say at a high level, I was really encouraged by the integrated grid planning report and process to see really the massive amount of growth that we're going to see in solar in particular. Right now I saw across solar and wind we're at 10% of the grid. And just the solar sector alone is expected to grow from 4% to 50% of the grid to get us to 100%. And so it's just really exciting that this group here and the group of IPPs play a really critical part of that. And also we have a lot of challenges as a group to overcome in getting there. So I'll stop there. I'll let Kirstin introduce herself.
Aloha, my name is Kirstin Punu. I head up project origination for our renewables, AES Hawaii, across the state of Hawaii, our renewables projects. I guess I could say maybe I'm the freshman in the development space. I hail from this beautiful island of Maui. I'm a very, very proud graduate of Maui High School. Go Sabres! Okay, not sure how many of you are out there. I had a really cool chance encounter last night of my 6th grade teacher from Makua school I ran into. I was away for 20 years. After I graduated, I went to the East Coast, and then I ended up in Japan, and I've lived in Hong Kong, and then the past 10 years on Oahu. I joined AES about 3 years ago, initially as a stakeholder relations manager. I give kudos to all of our organizations here that are represented on this stage for acknowledging that having local presence here, boots on the ground, is really, really critical to some of the success of developing in Hawaii and we'll go into that a little bit further. But AES, for those of you who don't know, is a global energy company that has a very strong local presence and a long history here in the state. 30 years of operating the Barbers Point coal facility that was shuttered at the end of 2022. And renewables renewables and the utility scale solar and storage projects that we are bringing online now were a very critical component of course, enabling the closure of that plant, and are a very important component of this equitable and responsible transition that we're making here across the state. So yeah, I will stop there, and maybe we can get into it.
Great. So as you can see, we have a very esteemed panel, and we are, I think just the projects up here. For how many folks are involved in, just so I get a sense of the audience, how many folks are involved in sort of the utility scale market in some way? Show of hands. Okay, and then how many folks are kind of on the commercial or residential scale? Okay. Okay, good. That's a good sense. We, for those that aren't involved in utility scale, the projects usually are planned to take 4 years, and then I'm say on average they probably take 5 or 6 if they don't fail completely. We've all had projects kind of on that gamut, right? I've sort of been involved with utility scale projects that have gone all the way, got constructed, and are currently operating, including 3 wind projects and then 3 solar projects, and then I've had other projects that have just crashed and burned, and at some point. So the projects are very complicated. But before we get depressed, let's talk about some of the wins. They said, we got you because you're optimistic. I was like, ooh, okay, optimistic Wren. I will be optimistic Wren. Let's talk about some of the wins. Aside from just the projects, I'm not talking about projects that were successfully completed, but what are some of the factors that have been helpful in making projects succeed? Nicola, why don't we start with you?
Sure, thanks, Wren. Yeah, it's nice to talk about the wins first and the successes before all the messy stuff, right? I would say one of the big highlights of success, as I mentioned, was the Mililani 1 solar project with 4 hours of battery storage. We were really proud to bring that project online 3 months ahead of its originally contracted COD. And that was when every other stage 1 and stage 2 project, including ultimately our Waiava project, were delayed due to supply chain and COVID, and now more recently, inflation, interest rates.
Hey, that's another question. Let's focus on the positive.
The positive. This is getting to the positive. But really, it was a success, and I think a key factor of that success really was the collaboration with our partners. I would give a lot of credit to Moss Construction. I know a lot of the team are here as one of our key partners that has constructed all 5 of Clearway's projects in Hawaii. And really having that partnership with Moss, along with all of our suppliers working together across Wärtsilä, Nextracker, J Solar, seeing that level of collaboration, and also having gone through the process with Hawaiian Electric on commissioning several projects leading up to that project, we were able to commission that project with a battery faster than we had commissioned our projects for solar alone. And I think that really is a testament to the operational experience we all had as a team working together across Clearway and Moss and Hawaiian Electric and our partners. So collaboration really is key. We say that a lot, but it's really true. And I think we saw that come together for Mililani 1. I would also say supply chain, was a really important factor. We procured a lot of that equipment very early. And so I think we saw with the challenges that came into play at that time, the projects that procured key equipment like batteries early were the ones that were not stuck in, the supply chain delays. And so Mililani, I guess, sort of made the cut before we really felt that the best enclosures getting delivered first to that project. And supply chain continues to be a really critical component in these projects, as we all know. That continues, right? Some of the supply chain issues that we're facing with key equipment like main power transformers that are expected to take over 2 years, long lead equipment. So yeah, I think those are some of the factors. And we talked about yesterday the governor's task force that us three all sort of sat on as being a really key component of bringing folks together to be accountable, private, public, across all of our various organizations to each other. So.
Yeah, that was an innovative idea. This was, Shelley mentioned it during the last presentation. I don't know whose idea it was, but they deserve a lot of credit. It pulled together a lot of the key, like DPP on Oahu, so county permitting agencies, DLNR, PUC, sort of a lot of the agencies, as well as all the developers that had PPAs approved by the PUC to figure out, okay, all these projects have to get built. What are the delays? How can we identify, what needs to happen and make sure there was really good communication among the government agencies. And it was a it would seem obvious that we're all talking together, but it really helped to have that monthly meeting to say, okay, whose turn is it next? Where's this project? Where's the next approval that is going to happen?
Red, that would be the governor, Governor Ige, by executive order. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Scott, great. Okay. Kirstin,
is it my turn?
Factors that helped you succeed?
Yes.
Or that helped your project succeed?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I realize, despite the fact that I have notes, that I forgot to also call out that I am here at this conference with several of my team members. And we're talking a lot about collaboration, and I would be remiss if I didn't, point out that we have our Director of Construction for Hawaii here, Cameron, I think you're in the room, our Stakeholder Relations Manager, Carice, please reach out to them, Kyle Blickley, who's here on the island, also working on our Kuhelani project, and Alston DaCosta, our technical guru specialist. So there's, it's Frederick Berg on our team. So it takes a village. We're going to say that over and over again. And I'm going to break protocol and do something a little different, perhaps. And I was inspired by a conversation I had at lunch yesterday, and I want you in the audience to turn to your right and turn to your left and look at the people next to you. And if you don't know them, get to know them, not now, but maybe after this session. Ask their name, ask what they do, know who they are. If you do know them, thank them. Because every single person in this room, I am absolutely positive, lent to our success, right? And to our team's success and to where we are today, right? So collaboration. We've all talked about collaboration. I think if we played the game I play with my children and you had a penny for every time we said collaboration, we wouldn't have to be here. Collaboration is absolutely key. Community feedback early, often, throughout the process. I think that was something, I started off in stakeholder relations, and it was obviously a very, very clearly identified priority for AES, and we went out to communities early, ounce of prevention, pound of cure, right? We went out there, we talked to communities, we presented the plans, we collected feedback, both empirical and holistic, listened, and then, the critical part of that is incorporating it into the plans, and then following up, right? And, being honest. Someone the other day, I'm sorry for not giving proper credit, but said, we at the speed of trust, right? And building that trust and following up and, communicating honestly when no can, when no can, when can, of course, can do it. So following up. And then the sense of urgency. To Wren's point, the Powering Past Coal Task Force was a very, very targeted and specific task force for the island of Oahu and the projects on the island of Oahu, because on top of the fact that we are facing a climate change emergency globally that is unprecedented, we here in Hawaii, and particularly the island of Oahu, was facing a sense of urgency with the coal plant shutting down and the loss of 180 megawatts of firm generation on the island. So the Powering Past Coal Task Force was set for the island of Oahu, but I reiterate Wren's sentiments that pulling all of these parties together, and community representatives were also involved in those conversations, and having the conversations and doing what we're doing right now and talking story, we saw that ripple effect for some of our other projects on some of the other islands. So I would reiterate that keep doing that, keep that sense of urgency. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to bring Noe in. Noe, you have developed wind projects on land. Tell me a little bit about the offshore wind project and some of the sort of additional, some of the challenges that are a little different with an offshore wind project.
I don't get to talk about winds.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges with offshore wind is it's the first of its kind, right? So anytime you're first out the gate, you have to deal with all the what ifs and all of the skepticism of how it's not going to work in Hawaii and how it's too hard and it's too complicated and why even try. Right, so getting through that before we can even get to trust, I think is a large challenge. And so to put it into like just regular implementation, creating the safety harness so when we go down the rabbit hole we can get back up is really important when we're talking about a project where it's the first of its technology, the first of its kind. At the same time, it's an incredible opportunity. We live in Hawaii where we have all the sun, wind, geothermal, ocean, and there's no reason why. Plus, we have all of the ancestral knowledge. So before we were here for 200 years, our ancestors were here for 800 years, and they clearly knew how to manage our natural resources so that we could live in abundance. And so putting that all together and understanding that is critically important for how we are able to move forward. I think the other challenge is just the breadth and depth of what it takes to do a floating offshore wind project. We trigger almost every single permit at the federal, state, and county levels in multiple ways. So part of our challenge also is that because it's a first of its kind, we often have to take off the developer hat and put on more of the policy hat and say, okay, this is your agency's jurisdiction. Here's the scope, right? Let's talk about the scope and let's talk about where it overlaps with this scope and this agency, and then let's try to get everybody together so we can better understand how we approach that in a way that adheres to the timing and the intention of why we have the permitting we have to make sure that we build this in the best way to ensure that there's little to no impact negative on our precious resources, right? So just the amount of complexity and convincing people to take the time to actually think about it versus being, I'm so busy, I don't have time, and your project's way over there, so I don't need to talk about it yet, right? So I would think those are, I mean, there's tons, but fundamentally, those are the parts that people don't think about.
Okay. Sticking with the theme of challenges, Nicola, challenges that you folks have faced or are going to face in future projects?
Where do we start? No, honestly, challenges are also opportunities, right? So I think I would say, I think at a high level, one of the larger challenges we face as developers is that we are locking in the prices for these long-term fixed projects very early versus the commercial operations dates. And we see this play out across every issue, right? We just bid prices in April for projects that will come online between 2027 and 2030. And there are so many factors that are changing on these projects. And I know we all feel that, right? Whether it's interconnection costs or inflation and interest rates and a lot of these risks. And as developers, that's what we do. It's part of the risk that we take. Development is by nature risky. And that's reflected in the cost of capital and those types of things. And that's part of what we do. We're making these decisions on an educated basis. Do we continue to incur a little bit more capital to advance this project? And at what point are we spending too much capital to advance a project that may not come to fruition, right? So we always, I think, confront that challenge sort of across the board. And, I don't know that I have a perfect solution to that, but I would say that we are locking in these prices really early, and that's become more challenging in the current environment where equipment costs are not coming down, at a precipitous rate as they were in the past, as we're seeing more risks, I think, in the marketplace. So I would just say that's one of the largest challenges that sort of extends across really everything, and that applies to whether it's property taxes, or in the past, state tax credits, really any of these things. Zendo said it really well on the panel yesterday. What developers really want is certainty, right? So we're taking risks, and whether it's tax credits, any policy that you look at, or the permitting process, which is a 2- or 3-way street, right? We're looking for certainty,
Yep.
And I think that is a challenge and an opportunity.
Right, and the process we go through when we bid our projects to Hawaiian Electric or to a utility, there are others, is that you bid after you bid the project, and this has happened in, you could see the difference between the stage 1 RFP projects and the stage 2 RFP projects, because stage 2 RFP, many of the projects hadn't bought their equipment. So following the pandemic, the supply chain and the inflation that followed was drove up prices for so many things, including shipping. Shipping was 5, 6, 10 times what it was per container. On one of our projects, we had a $30 million increase in the cost of the batteries we were going to procure. And the process right now, it's a multi-year process, and it doesn't include the ability to go back and say, this external factor happened, can we change the price? And so that really got, so you saw what happened, or not, of the companies that were approved in the stage 2 process, some of them went back to the PUC, the Hawaiian Electric and the PUC, and asked to renegotiate the prices, which, those results have been issued publicly. And then others, like Longroad Energy, we ended up canceling our projects because we felt like we just don't know what this environment is going to do. If we get a price increase, even if we get it approved, the price in 6 months might be even higher, and we couldn't sustain it. Because at some point you can't build the project, if it's not feasible. So you saw of the stage 2 projects, which I call stage 2 as in I gotta go number 2. Didn't work out well for some companies. And you saw many of the projects fall out. But we've already made changes. Stage 3 includes some protection for in the case that there's that inflationary that happens again or similar things happen. So we've made adjustments, but the process is a challenge. Right now, the way it is, because you don't want to lose 4 years, and then you have to start. We're starting again in stage 3, right? And it's difficult. So, Kirstin, challenges?
Maybe similar, but put another way. I don't know how many of you are project management professionals out there. PMP, yes. These are projects, inherently these are development projects. These are just like we're developing anything else, building a house. Scope, schedule, budget, the iron triangle, right? And what we're all talking about here is when you have these 2 fixed factors, right? When you've got your schedule, your guaranteed commercial operations date that's built into your contract, and you're facing liquidated damages for every day that you don't meet that contract, and that's to protect all of us, and that's the beautiful thing about us being residents is like the one half of me when I go to work and I put on my AES hat, I'm like, oh my God, we're not going to make it. And then the other half of me when I go home and pay my electric bill, I'm like, oh yes, fixed rates, yay. So it's this balance and this iron triangle of we have to get these projects on time, delivered on time, on budget. Then we've got the only thing left is scope, and that's the only and project development is hard. It's inherently hard. And the more time these projects take, and we want to go out and we want to collect feedback and we want to get, but when we start getting new parameters placed on us, when policies change, when tax rates change, that really starts to skew the triangle. And ultimately, as Wren stated, if we get too far off kilter, we're all publicly traded companies, I believe, where, we have to answer to, no? Okay, oh.
No.
Wow, I learned something new. In any case, publicly traded company, we have to answer to investors, and sometimes that is the end of a project.
Great. Noe, other challenges?
And building on that, I think at the community level, because I spend a lot of time with different hats when I'm not in renewable energy dealing with community, the fact that we're companies that are not, while we all live and we're born and are going to die, well, I'm born and going to die here, but while we live here, we're residents, our companies are not Hawaii-based companies. So having to gain the trust of communities that we're not going to cut and run, and that we have the leadership that is really committed to the project to make it work, or if it doesn't work, to walk away nicely, is fundamentally important. And that's something that I think you hit head on, you acknowledge, you address, but from a stakeholder and a community level, people are like, I'm going to live here, and no matter what happens with your company, you can always leave, right? And that's something that is inherent. I get asked all the time, why don't you just create a company? It's like, and the answer is because I don't have the capital, right? And it's you need a lot of capital to be able to do this. So I think that's something to also, that's not a solution. That's something we address and we continue, but it's something to be cognizant of.
Okay, we've had several panels that have touched on engaging the community in these projects. So I would like to ask, how do you when you start working on a project, just practically, how as a developer do you stay on the same side of the table as members of the community? We all are from here. We all live here. We want to do projects that the community supports. So, how do you do that? How do you stay on the same side of the table as a community? Kirstin?
Now,
yeah.
Let me go first.
I saw you cringing, so I went to you first. Did I mention we're all competitors?
I'm going to call out Murray Clay. He was backstage, like egging us on right before we went on stage, So, no, we're all competitors, and we're all having healthy conversations, so it's good. How do we stay on the same side of communities? Follow through, trusted developers, learn from our mistakes, listen, and be honest. I truly believe, don't make empty promises. If we cannot, we cannot. And then the next time you come to a community and you ask permission, because really all of these projects require discretionary permits, and we are, our land use policies are put in place to protect our delicate balance that we've been talking about, for the duration of this conference. Innately, the permitting process is built to protect our natural environment, and so we go in and we ask permission and we seek, our entitlements and our permissions, and we have to be honest in that process, and then we have to follow through. I think that's number one. And then kind of like this shared responsibility in that as well. I think in the community engagement panel, we were talking about how there's a shared responsibility, and that, those community members and those members on the other side of the table that have a vested interest in the projects also needs to come to the table with that same kind of open mindset and collaborative mindset in place. I also really want to stress, I want to acknowledge that maybe the elephant in the room, we've talked about this a bit, but there are technological limitations. We cannot, if no more wind, no more wind. If no more sun, no more sun. I mean, hilo. We can, but there's going to be trade-offs, right? There's technological limitations, and so when we are talking about the renewable energy zones and the planning process, I get, and the forward thinking, truly collaborative processes that many of our counterparts are engaging in. The Hawaii State Energy Office with the Energize Kako program, give them absolute kudos. That was incorporated into the Stage 3 RFPs, the IGP, and the discussion about renewable energy zones and areas that are focused for transmission, and then distribution upgrades, which is super exciting, and bringing those really complex, heavily technical points together and speaking in clear language to our communities and saying, okay, we can only put this stuff in certain places, first and foremost. We know we would like to put it out in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes we cannot. But what we're doing is we're trying to find a good balance of where the resources are, where the energy is needed. We're working on that. Please trust us. And we hear you about your other competing priorities. We hear you about cost of living. We hear you about affordable housing. And guess what? Transmission upgrades, distribution upgrades, that will help us to get this clean, affordable energy to you, and it will help enable lower cost, shared costs, and lower cost housing and lower costs of living. And that's going to rise all ships. How do we say that in plain language, and how do we do it with far fewer words than I just did? I don't know. Clearly, I don't have the answer.
Thank you. Nicola?
I would just
Thoughts on
echo, I
community?
think you did a great job summarizing a lot of the issues and discussion points that we had on the community
She did
panel
use a lot of
yesterday.
words, though, in doing
Portuguese, Wren, come on. You.
The only thing I would add, Kirstin, to that is that I think it's finding that shared sense of ownership of the projects and it really is that community-led aspect of it. And we're seeing that. I think it's come a long way in the time that I've been here. And I think through these community benefits funds that are hearing from the needs of the community and evolving and iterating, we're going to see more sense of ownership of these projects, whether that's through agrivoltaics, where communities are saying, I was opposed to this use on ag lands, but now I see opportunities for my community, for farmers in my community to have a piece of this project, to be a part of it, to see greening of a piece of land that wasn't being used for agriculture. And
Nicola, I would just want to interrupt. So this Nicola's working on a very exciting project, this
With Wren.
agrivoltaic project.
With Wren.
And actually all three, Kirstin,
Kirstin,
AES,
sorry,
and
yes.
Clearway and Longroad are all co-contributing to this agrivoltaic research project, which is happening, it's on Oahu in Mililani. Tell us about the project, Nicola.
Come and see it, please. I think it's been really, I think the most exciting part of it, in addition to the research, is just that we've had this opportunity to bring people out and to have that advocacy around seeing actual lettuce growing in and amongst the panels and taro and all these different crops that we're trialing, and to see how we're going to be able to scale that. We're expanding the research. All of us have contributed to the expansion of that research over the next several years. That part of it has been really exciting because you hear from policymakers and you hear from local farmers who are training farmers, right, to become farmers, and seeing this as this real growth opportunity, right, where we don't have to see solar and wind development in opposition to agricultural lands going forward, and where we're creating these long-term opportunities. Like, one of the big challenges for farmers is that they don't have long-term leases, or that those leases are expensive, and we're offering effectively free land with infrastructure, right? And there are challenges that we need to work through in terms of operating effectively as a farmer, but that's part of what this research is exploring that I think is really exciting, is finding ways to do that safely and effectively, and also not over-promising in terms of the production per acre that we're going to get out of that, but we're creating a win-win, right, for community, and I think we'll see more of a sense of ownership of those types of projects.
Yeah, excellent. Noe, talk a little bit about your approach to community engagement, and how do we move past sort of, the old model is the developer makes a contribution to a local nonprofit. I mean, we've come a long way since then. I think communities are demanding more, and I think developers are, I think both sides really need to move more toward away from, do much more than that for community and get more closer to community ownership. And how do you approach that?
I think a big part of that, to segue from what you were talking about, is us not siloing ourselves in just renewable energy, right? So we all wear different hats. So as an example, when you guys are doing that, I'm participating in the Transforming Hawaii Food Systems, sitting down with all the farmers saying, no, energy is not your enemy. Let's open the door. Let's figure out how do we work together and how do we stay on the same side of the table in terms of creating a thriving Hawaii. Like, with energy and food, there's not really any competition because we need all of it and we don't have enough, right? So yes, we can compete in an RFP and we're happy to do that. But when you look at the overarching part, we just need food and energy. So how do we figure out where we are in the spectrum and how we contribute to that? In terms of answering your question, thank you. Yeah, I've been always very critical of just write the check, right? We've always done a lot more in terms of really working with stakeholders and really having them feel and listening so that they can share with us how to make the project theirs, right? Because we want, the biggest success is when somebody says, yeah, I was part of that. And so we have been working on a community participation model and working with different communities and having discussions that we will do a lot more of, but really framing the question around what does community participation in the development, operations, construction, and decommissioning of a project mean, right? And that can, I don't know the answer. I know I have assumptions of what it can be. Some people have shared with me, yes, I want to be a part of a community ownership. Others, especially Kupuna, have shared with me, babe, I don't care about the money. I like talk to the guys who make the decisions and I want them to listen. I want to sit down with that board once a year or more and I want them to listen to me, right? So it's a gamut of what does it mean and how do we address that? But I think first and foremost, it's not only couching it in renewable energy, right? It's a interwoven system and meeting the community, understanding from the community what are their priorities and not saying, oh, that's housing, let me call the housing person, but saying, okay, for housing, how do we address that? How is clean energy going to help with that? Who can we work with? Can we call forests and talk about shifted energy? Who do we know in this room? How do we solve this problem systemically?
Okay, excellent. I wanted to ask for ideas. This is kind of the blue sky portion of the discussion. For those of you that have ideas of how to move projects, these types of projects along more quickly, I would like to ask you to just throw some ideas in the chat and be happy to mention them. We're looking for ideas from everywhere. I would like to see, first of all, I will say that our customer, except for the projects on Kauai, our common customer is Hawaiian Electric. Noe and I have been involved in the IGP planning process. It started in, 2018. It's, the utility is moving really aggressively to accommodate, to transition to renewable energy. The firm generation that they're talking about replacing is needed for system stability, but they're not talking about replacing generators that burn oil all the time with generators that burn biofuel all the time. They're talking about replacing them with firm generators that are going to run much less of the time on renewable fuels. They're moving really quickly and trying to do it comprehensively to include, the integrated grid plan includes residential systems, it includes commercial systems, it includes utility scale, it includes transmission. They're trying to wrap all of those processes wrap that all into a more inclusive planning process going forward. So a few graphics that I've seen during the presentation, really, if you haven't yet, really take a look at the integrated grid plan which they've put out. It's on their website. It's really a comprehensive look at what are we going to do. And the question about, do we go utility scale? Do we go DER? Do we go wind? The answer is unequivocally, we need so much renewable energy, we must do all. Yes to all those three, and more. So, the ideas that we're going to that I'd like to throw out are thinking, I'm thinking more on the utility scale side. How do we move the projects quicker? We've certainly run into a lot of challenges. I would like to see, my dream, top of the list for Santa, is the 10-page power purchase agreement. I don't know if you've seen the PPA lately, but when we started at Kahuku Wind, it was a monster. It was probably like 110 pages. Now it's like, I don't know, and the PSA is included. So we're going to talk 500 pages. It's a big beast.
Are you including the DC coupled addendum and the PSA and the...
We start with the 10-page one, maybe 20, Just throw it out and start from scratch. Anyway, that's one of my ideas. Other ideas?
I'll cheer that one on. The IGP was really exciting to see, and I would agree with you. There's just a massive amount of renewables of all kinds that we need to bring onto our system, and we can't do it soon enough. I think looking at that, the big opportunity I see is transmission sooner. I think all of us have faced this, confrontation of a great site, probably a community acceptable site that simply doesn't have interconnection capacity. And I think you look at that integrated grid plan and all of the opportunity, and it will be constrained if we're not able to build transmission to these areas sooner. And that will take time, right? So I think if we want to see more of these large-scale projects in well-sited locations with community acceptance, we need to see transmission coming online sooner. Mm-hmm. So that's my big wish.
Absolutely. Kirstin?
Yeah, and I would be remiss not to say that that's a national conversation, right? Our very own Senator Schatz is leading the charge on permitting reform to enable, nationwide transmission. So, and we're just here in Hawaii in this like microcosm of a space, so we feel it very acutely. So, thank you, Nicola. I guess now would be a good time to disclose that I am an urban planner. Woo, planners in the house. Turned.
You got more cheers for the high school reference.
I know. Come
urban
on.
Planning. Yeah.
Yeah, planners. So I'm a planner empath. So I just wanted to disclose. Look ahead, prepare. What can we do to bring these projects online faster? So we spent some time up here talking about the HECO Stage 3 RFP. Raise your hand if you knew that there was an RFP that just closed in April. Okay, that's pretty good. It should be all of us, to be perfectly honest. We're here at this conference. I mean, this is the mechanism by which projects get put in the ground, right? So we submitted bids for those of you, and I'm embracing my fears. I hate numbers. So I asked ChatGPT how much energy we were looking for, and it said approximately 1.7 terawatt hours annually, or my smart people tell me if that's all met with solar and battery storage, where it's about 1.8 gigawatts of projects, right? In the next 4 to 7 years. 4 to 7 years. So, planning departments, planning directors, anyone that's going to touch these, let's give a hand for the consultants. Yay, SMEs, we love you guys. We're gonna be calling you if we haven't already. Like, we need to do studies, we need to do geotech, we need to start doing, site work, we need to start our cultural, and then the frustrating thing is we can't talk about it yet, right? Well, theoretically, we can't talk about it. So look ahead. For those of you who truly know me, this is going to be a really weird analogy because I'm probably the only Hawaii-born kama'aina that not only does not surf, but does not like particularly to surf. But we got to be paddling to catch that wave, right? Like we have to start now. Maui projects are supposed to be in the ground by 2027. We will not know that we are awarded those projects until October of this year. That's not a lot of time. Yeah, so
Order your transformers today.
order your transformers today.
Yesterday.
How many you got, Wren? You're not publicly traded. I don't.
Okay, Noe, ideas for solutions?
On the long-term RFP, with what we were talking about, we need to figure out how we can commit to a price and then figure out how we share in the upside between the developer, the utility, and the community, right? We have to be able to engage in that versus, again, this sounds like a theme, but everybody's saying, it's too hard to figure out. No, we got to figure it out. You know, that's we're hitting the point where all the quote easy development is done, right? And we're going to have to start figuring those questions out, and we really need to. And I'll gladly referee between all of you on who gets what transformer.
Yeah, that's right. One of the constraints is that we've sort of alluded to is land. On Oahu, certainly we're facing a constraint with land availability to develop solar on Oahu, for sure. Well, to develop anything on Oahu. You know, I think it would be helpful to have, to look for, you know, I think ways to communicate with landowners and see what land might be available. Hawaiian Electric has like a land RFI, but that's not really widely known by a lot of people. But some access to landowners, turn to your right, turn to your left, ask them if they have 100 acres of land, please. And then come see me after. Other possible, other ideas? You guys have other ideas that we could, Noi?
I don't know if it's an idea. It kind of goes towards de-risking and or honoring, right? There's a lot of ancestral knowledge about the land and the ocean and what the elements do. We have to have cultural practitioners at the table at all stages through these processes, and they need to be at the table from the geographic areas that we are all working in, because it'll save so much if we can build the trust for them to share their mana'o and help us moving forward. Like, again, the other theme is there's so many answers we already have. We need to create open processes that allow for that knowledge to inform the direction for Hawaii.
I'd like to riff off that, because I did have some notes on this one, and this is beautiful. You know, exactly. We have the knowledge. We have this century-old knowledge and this idea of start with permission, right? The protocol, start with permission. When we are using land, we're using large numbers of land. I did want to make a correction. Kuihelani is 450 acres, not 600, as was stated yesterday, but it's okay, 450, but that's still a lot of land, right? Previously undeveloped and or used for agricultural purposes. It's a trauma. It's a trauma to see it change use. And so starting from a premise of permission, yesterday we heard from Mahina Duart, Paishan Duart, and Celeste Connors. And, you know, again, I noted the work that the HSEO is doing on Energized Kako. We have, so more than maybe a policy change, this is maybe a process change, incorporating some of the work that the Aloha Aina rubric has put into place and has been used for some of our largest and more complex infrastructure projects, I believe the Alawai Canal, and incorporating that into our process, I think could be a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I would just echo that. Following the panel yesterday, I had a lot of great conversations with these types of cultural practitioners that want to play more of that role as a bridge between developers and community. So if it's not developers going to talk to community, it's really community members talking to community members and acting as that bridge. Yep. And I think if we can sort of, make a process around that in terms of the procurement and also the land scoping process, I think that would be a really exciting change.
And I have one last point on that too. These rubrics and these tools, it helps us to, it helps me. It helps me go back to the folks that I go to for permissions on the capital side, and I don't have to sit there and explain mana'o and ike and kupuna and you know and the protocols. It's more of an empirical, again, just a tool that we can use to translate. You know.
Couple of questions from the audience. Is there more that the utility or state can do to help developers with general public and community acceptance? So I think the conversation about climate change, sea level rise, and impact to our state, and how the part these renewable energy projects play in this is so important. We will never be able to say that enough to enough people. So I think the state and the utility have already started campaigns where they are informing the public about this messaging. I think even though a lot of us in this room, we get it already, we think it's been done to death, we keep having to say it to people. I think it's really important that just continues to be a message so that everybody understands how important it is. As Murray's slides showed, it's not a question between an empty green field and a solar project on a green field. It's a question between a solar project and a power plant. We have to replace our energy. We don't have a choice. So the state, the utility, they're already making steps in this, and those efforts have to continue. So it's not just developers out there waving the climate change flag. Another question, do your organizations support community equity ownership and projects in their location? Noe spoke a little bit to that. There is a project, I believe it's an EDF project in Canada, that is 51% owned by First Nations groups. The project is majority owned by First Nations groups. The company EDF developed the project, built the project, completed it, and then under agreement with the group sold 50% of that project to the First Nations group, which raised the funding and used commercial financing to purchase it, and then they benefit from the spread between the income from the project and the debt payments. And they have the ownership. There's no reason why we can't. I would really like to see us start looking at different models of that so that communities feel like it's not just some mainland developer, throwing down a project in Kahuku or Waianae or something, and they're just taking, I'm not picking on anyone specifically. We have a project in Kahuku too, and taking the project somewhere, taking the profit somewhere else. It really is real community ownership. And I think we need to look at, I would love to see us look at stuff like that. I'm just going to answer all these.
Wren's got it.
Nicola, what's the time frame expected to test the agrivoltaic project and then sort of roll it out at scale?
That's a great question. And I think, I know across AES, Longroad, and Clearway, we're looking at that. We're really only operating the research on a couple of acres. We have a piece of that research on sort of a larger row spacing area in Lani Kuhana, and we've expanded the research into the Mililani 1 portion of the project, which is tighter row spacing. And so we're looking at some of the challenges of the tighter row spacing and the differences in production that we're going to see to help us do that scaling. We're looking at something on the order of like going from a couple acres to 20 to 25 acres and starting with that sort of scale with farmers. I think, Wren, some of the projects that you're working on are looking at quite a lot larger an area, and certainly I think it takes a diversified approach. So we have hundreds of head of sheep at our YPO project, at our Mililani project, and while that's not directly leading to food production today, it could in the future, and I think we're looking at other things like apiaries, beekeeping, right, in and amongst the panels. So I think it's a diversified approach to agriculture that's going to see us scaling until that actually covering the entire footprint of hundreds of acres of project. But I'm excited about the opportunities to scale, and I think workforce development is a really big part of that, training the farmers and enabling farmers to be able to operate within larger footprints of these projects. The time scale for the research, I mean, like I said, we have a many years commitment through HARC, Hawaii Agricultural Research Center, and through our Stage 3 projects to see agrivoltaics incorporated.
Okay, thank you. These projects are really hard. If you didn't get the subtitle of these of the panel, projects are super hard. Why do you do it? They take a long time. They're super hard. Sometimes they fail. Why do you do it?
We don't have a lot of time
to answer. Why? Tell me why I do it.
That is the
why
question.
Do you do it?
I personally am an environmentalist at heart. I'm a biology major originally, and I came to this, I think, like a lot of us, just from a pure love of environment and nature, and wanting to protect it. And I think whether you come from research or a planning background, this is fighting climate change in action. It's addressing the urgency of the challenges that we're facing head on. And I am so encouraged when I see another project come online, even if it took 10 years and chutes and ladders to get there. We were talking about that. We got there. And to see that project come online and be able to tell my daughters that when they flip the switch, there's electrons flowing from these solar projects that they've seen, and they're pointing to mommy's solar panels, and heard, that from Shelley as well, to hear that from the CEO of our utility. Like, we are doing this for the future generations. And I know all of us here feel that, and we're truly passionate about it, and we truly care. So I don't know what else I would be doing. I'm going to fight the good fight until there's no more tankers of oil being delivered to our island.
Historically, mothers, I think, have been the call to action, and the drivers of a lot of really, really amazing efforts. And I think you put it beautifully. Thank you, Nicola.
Noe?
I was born here, I'm gonna die here. I mean, at the end of the day, Aina is Ohana, and we have, as humans, our kuleana is to take care of our eldest siblings, which is all of nature. And we have to help with the rebalance so that we can continue.
All right. I'd like to thank all our panelists, and thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed our discussion.